Hi, my name is Mike Baio, and I'm with Bangert Inc. We're going to be discussing what to do to prepare for year-end for Sage Intacct construction payroll. We'll go through what steps you should take ahead of time to ensure the payroll year-end tasks will run smoothly. So let's just dive right in. One of the first things I always recommend doing, especially before you physically get into the new calendar year, is run a series of reports that are listed in the system, which I call our payroll totals reports. These reports, they're not date-based, but they rather print year-to-date, quarter-to-date, month-to-date totals. And they're really based specifically on the date stamp in your system. So, you really want to run these before you get into January 1 of the new year, or you'll lose those totals. Now, there are ways to fake the system out and change your system date and things like that. But, just try and run them usually after your last payroll run of the year. You physically won't be in, that new calendar year yet. So at that point, just go ahead and go into your system and run those reports. So I'm going to show you here on the screen where you can find them. If you go to applications, now they may be on a desktop, they may be in your payroll report menu. You can put them in different places in the system. But, when they get uploaded into your system, they're going to reside under reports, interactive custom reports, and they're going to have, first of all, they're going to be labeled with payroll on their name. So in my sample here, I'm about the second page in, you're going to see all the payroll reports. Now there's register reports, there's detail reports that you run typically on a week-to-week basis. Look for the ones that have a label with, that have totals in the names. Those are the ones that are quick, print out very nice for you for year-end information, quarter-end information. You don't have to do too much work to get those reports. So, for example, let's grab the payroll employee earnings totals report. So in this case, I'm just going to click run. And when I do that now, what you'll notice here is it's not going to ask me for any date information. It will ask me if I want to range the employees. What type of check statuses do I want to run this off of? And typically you're going to run this only off of approved or posted time. And at that point, I'm just going to click view and it'll generate the information for me right on my screen. So I'll wait for that to generate. And as soon as that pops up, you'll notice here, there's no dates. You basically have your employee information, the different type of earnings that they had for the year. And then you're going to see totals based on month to date, quarter to date, and year to date. So basically, this is going to give us a nice little recap that we can have, for example, of year to date earnings. And at that point, you can scroll down if you want to. You can export that report to an Excel file. You can do it to a PDF, whatever you want to do to save that information. You can have that printed out for you. You can also process and store it. So a lot of times people will click process and store, and then you can actually store it right in Intacct, and you can give it year-to-date earnings, 2023. Okay, and then what type of report is it? We'll say it's a printable report, and we'll click OK. And that'll store this report so you can always get back to it regardless of when the date is. Okay, so what I would recommend is going into your reports, step one, and just print out the deductions totals, print out the tax totals. This is a nice one here. Actually, one more page in, we have the, where is it? The payroll tax total report. Here's one right here. So this one's going to show me all the taxes, employer and employee based, which is a really nice report to have when getting ready for things like W-2s, etc. So if I run that one, you get an example of what this looks like. So you can see here's for the employee, every tax that was calculated and whether it's an employee or employer tax. Okay, so I would recommend step one, get these totals, payroll totals report generated and saved, and then you have them if you need them for reference later on. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the main screen here. Now, the next thing we'd want to recommend that you do to get you ready, prepare for your payroll year end, is just to go through and confirm and check and make sure all of your data is up to date in the system. For example, employee information, maybe you have current addresses, social security numbers. And then we'll get into some of the settings areas where you should go to make sure you have things like your federal tax IDs in there, your state ID numbers, stuff like that, that will go and make sure you have all set and ready to go for when you're actually connecting in and generating W-2s. So back in the setup of payroll, if you recall, there's a couple places where your employee information is going to reside. So the first place you want to look is in the time and expense employees. So in there is where you're going to make sure you have your latest address information for your employees. So if I click on that, and then you do want to make sure you're at the proper entity level. If you have multiple companies or multiple entities, make sure you're in that entity level to get your proper employee list. So for example, if I go into time and expense, employees, and we'll just pull up an employee. Let's pull up Randy here for a sec. And as far as where the employee address information is, it's going to be stored with their contact name. So you can get to it right from here, the primary contact. You can click view. You can also go over to contacts on the second tab and see there's the primary contact, and I can click on Randy right from here. So in here is going to be the phone information. And then in the mailing information tab, you want to make sure you have the current addresses up to date. If you need to edit anything, you can do that right here. And you can also generate some custom reports or ICRW reports that, run your employee address information. But anything you need to do, you can come into here and change as well. Some of the other information that you want to look at the employee record is that's going to be over specifically more in the payroll module. So if we go into payroll, and you go into setup employees, and again, that's going to be at the entity level. You can pull that information up here. One of the most hidden fields in the system, for example, is the social security number. So just to check and make sure those are in the system, when you pull up the individual employee, it's going to be under this view details button here. So if I click on that, it's going to pop up the social security information. So you want to, double check those. Especially if it's your first payroll year end, make sure those have been brought in correctly. We didn't leave anybody out. Just again, double check that information. As far as what else to check in the setup here, in the employee setup, there is one area down near the bottom here in the first tab under details where, when we do interface, and we'll talk about interfacing with Atrix for our W-2s, has this employee given permission to accept a electronic W-2? There's a tag down here in the bottom. So if you say yes, then you'll have that option over in Atrix when it comes time. If you say no, you won't, but that's where that setting resides, right over here in the system, along with some other information, full-time, seasonal, okay? That's really it as far as the employee goes. Now, in addition to the employees, there's some other areas in payroll. You want to make sure you have all your latest information set up and ready to go, more for company specific. And that's going to be over in payroll. And that's going to be under the entity setup. So under setup entity, you're going to have an entity settings for each entity that you do payroll with. If you have more than one, you'll see more than one on the list here. But in this scenario today, we're going to go through the Timberline General Construction entity. So if I click on that, it's going to open up the details. And this is something that you definitely want to check because most likely it's one of the first things you set up in Intacct when you went live with payroll. And, sometimes that stuff gets neglected and we'll come back to it later. So you definitely want to get into here and just review, make sure all your information is correct for the entity. So you have the entity details tab here. This is where you're going to store your federal tax ID. What kind of employer are you? This is stuff that's going to be pulled in on the W-2s, for example, or your tax reporting, your annual reporting for the government. Now, one thing you'll notice here is a field called Atrix Customer Identity. And we're going to go into Atrix next and making sure that you have enabled that setup and created a an account for Atrix. And this is where it's saying what is the company name that you set up in Atrix that is related to this entity. So I had set one up called Banger Demo. So I'll list it here. And I'll show you again when we get into the Atrix where that is stored. Now, an important piece that is often missed is this entity reporting section here. And what you need to do is for any tax that you report on, whether it's W-2s or state tax reporting, you need to set up the item here and link the account number that's tied to that tax reporting authority. So in some cases, they're the same as your federal ID. In some cases, they're not. But for example, here, if I'm withholding income tax for 3 or 4 different states, I need to list those states here so I can pull up my list and grab which state. This is Oregon. And what's the account number? And then basically you'll just hit the plus button here and add another line, as many as you need. If you don't fill them in here, then when you get into Atrix, it's going to say, hey, you have missing information. You can fill it in on the fly, but you're going to have to fill it in every time that you do it. So if you can get this filled out ahead of time, it's going to help. It's only going to help you. Okay, so you want to do this for any of these reporting areas. You know, I did it for the states, for the federal. Just list them out here. The next area to check in as far as setup goes, and this is more again in preparation for W-2s and for your tax reporting, is to make sure that your pay modifiers, your taxes, different areas in the payroll module are set up to integrate and coded to go to the correct spots in Atrix. And what I mean by that is, if you notice, let's take an example. Let's take a look at the taxes setup in payroll. If you take a look at the taxes setup in payroll, and let's just pull up federal income tax, USFIT. If you scroll down near the bottom, you're going to see this reporting area, and you'll see this in all your taxes. You'll see it in your pay modifiers, any area that you can possibly use to integrate into Atrix and use for W-2s and quarterly reporting and all that good stuff. Basically, what these fields are down here is they're fields to be used in conjunction with Atrix. And in this case, it's federal withholding, so it doesn't need any specific codes. We're just going to select the report as federal income tax. Now, for the most part, the taxes come already set up with all this, so you shouldn't have to set anything up, but I would definitely recommend at least reviewing it to make sure it is there and someone hasn't accidentally changed it. But down in here, if you go into federal income tax, use these little informational buttons because it'll kind of give you an idea of what you need to do there. So for example, employee tax type number, it's going to give you examples of what should go here and what is it for? It's for the Atrix module. And we're going to go into that in a second. So you should definitely review the taxes, and this goes along with any, state tax you're doing again. So for example, if I want to take a peek at California state, actually Oregon, because we know we had some before here. Let's alphabetize this. And let's just type in OR. Okay, so there is our Oregon state income tax. And you'll notice down at the bottom, report as a state income tax, and there is a number filled in there. Okay, and so forth. So you should check this out, and we'll talk about what these are in a second. But you should definitely go and make sure they're in there for the taxes, especially for your state unemployment. So you do need to set up your own state unemployment reporting information areas, as you did need to set this tax up. So if, again, it's one of those things that, well, we'll set it up when we need it type of thing. So you'll see here that this one doesn't have anything set up, and you could say it's report as a state unemployment insurance. It's going to be the state level. And how do we know, is it employee, employer? This is an employer tax. So how does it know what Atrix number to get? So if we come here and say employer tax type number, hit this little informational button, you're going to see this little button here called read more. Go ahead and click on that. That's going to take us into the payroll knowledge base and take us directly into a complete tax table and tax codes that Atrix uses to connect. So from this list, I usually recommend favoriting it. This list, you can see exactly what tax. So here's state withholding. So if I needed to report on Arizona state withholding, I would use this code right here, this TT number column B. These are the 4-digit codes that need to be associated with your setups of your taxes and your pay modifiers. And if I go down far enough, you have unemployment here. And which one was I on? I was on Oklahoma. So if I want to find the code for Oklahoma, you have to know your alphabet, but there's Oklahoma. And now I can go to the left and I can say the code is 1079. So I can come over to here and go down, and because it's an employer tax, 1079, I can put my code in. And then I can click save. Okay, so that's how the system's going to know to report it properly in Intacct when it's connecting in with the Atrix product. Another area is going to be over in your pay modifiers. So you have these system pay modifiers. And I know a lot of times we try and get these filled out when we're first setting the system up. But in some cases, you just might not know, or we want to get payroll going. We'll come back into it later. So, for example, one common area is going to be 401k. So if I come into the 401k pay modifier, and how does that need to report on the W-2? So if I scroll down here, you'll notice you have reporting right here. And it gives me a great explanation of what you should be doing here. You have a tax type. For example, if it's 401k, 3304 indicates box 12 code D. Okay. And again, if I click on the learn more, it's going to open up that field for me. Now I still have it open over here, so I don't need to click it again. But what I can do is page down. You could download this and make your own filters on it, but I'm just paging down until I get to W-2s. There's a lot of local stuff in here, but you can go down pretty quick. There's your W-2 information, and you'll notice there's all the fields for W-2 and what needs to go where. So you have your W-2 name, description of it, and if I look down here in there's your Roth, all your different codes, but there's the 401k one, which is going to be code D, W-2 box 12 code D for a 401k, and it's going to use 3304. So I can come over to here for my pre-tax contribution, 3304. Okay. And you could fill that out there and do it accordingly. Now the system's going to track where does it go for your contribution pre-tax, for the match pre-tax. And also because 401k in the Intacct system covers both the pre and after tax, you may have 401k/Roth set up that you have both here. So you're going to want to make sure you fill out the after tax code along with the pre-tax. So for that, you scroll down, I believe it's one of these ones here. There's the Roth contributions under section 401k plan. So that would be the 3323. So that one would go 3323 right there. And then you would check report in that scenario. But this is critical. You want to make sure these are set up correctly. And any of these pay modifiers that you need to report on the W-2, that's what needs to be set up to connect that. So one example might be HSA or paid family leave, whatever you have that needs to be on the W-2, you're going to go find it on your list. And then you're going to go into it. I'll just grab this health one here. And then you're going to fill out the reporting underneath here, report, and what's the number, which is the Atrix number. Okay. So that's critical. That needs to be set up. You need to review that for all, and you'll get a chance to verify it and view it when we get into the Atrix setup. But that's where that information resides when you see reporting or compliance reporting down in the bottom of your setup screens. So next, let's make sure that you are enrolled in Atrix. If you already are, that's great. You can skip ahead in this section. But if you aren't, one of the areas that you need to do is get enrolled in the Atrix integration. So to do that, if you have the Banger dashboard, you can go into dashboards here, Banger deployment. And in the recommended sites, you're going to see a Sage Intacct Construction Payroll site that you can click right on. And that'll take you right into help.cloudpayrollengine.com. So if you don't have the Banger desktop, just go to help.cloudpayrollengine.com. It'll take you right into here. You're going to have to create a login for that, but it just needs your name and email address to do so. So from there, you could simply type in enroll in Atrix, and it'll find the knowledge base article on that. So if you click on enroll with Atrix, you'll get some instructions here on how to go ahead and get yourself enrolled, what you need to do. So you can always use this as a reference for after this session. But the reason I go into it here is because it basically tells you the website to go into, which really is efile.atrix.com. And if you click on that, that's going to take you into the login page. Now, if you already have a login, you can go ahead and log in here and see your information. If you don't, you can click enroll on the top right corner of the screen here. And if you go ahead and click enroll, it's going to ask you to create your own username, password. It is going to require you to list what accounting package you're integrating to. So if you type in Sage Intacct, it will find it under software vendor. You'll see it right there. Then it's going to require you to fill out some contact information, email, verify your email. And then the most important part down here is the company information. So this is where you're going to have to put in your 9-digit EIN number and the company name. So this company name here, if you remember, is the one that we're ultimately going to link to over in the entity setup in payroll. So if we go over to payroll setup entity, you will, if you remember, if you go into the entity under GC, right here, Atrix customer identity. Okay, Banger demo is what I have. You're going to put in your whatever company name you fill in here, and that's how it's going to know to integrate and link into that system with the EIN number and the company name. So once you're enrolled, you can go ahead and save the changes. And I'm going to go ahead and log in and show you what it looks like after you do enroll. And you could log in from here as well if you want to check and make sure your information is up to date before you start the process. You can click login right here. And I'm going to put my login information in. And once I log in, it's going to show me my account. And you'll see up on top here, you have companies. So if you click on companies, once you get enrolled, you should see the company right here. And you can see there's my EIN number and my company name, and then there's my company information. So you could go ahead and update that if you need to. And you could sign the e-file authorization form. You could print it, or you can sign it electronically just by clicking here. Go ahead and sign your name and then save that form. And then you're going to have to check off some boxes, put your name in. And then click submit. And then you could check some statuses like, hey, have e-file confirmation sent to contact email address. So you can check that off. I should get an email in there. But basically, if you can get to this screen in Atrix and you can see your company and your EIN number, you're all enrolled and registered for Atrix. And basically from there, you could get out of those screens, get back into your system, and just make sure you return back to the entity information in the payroll setup and put in that Atrix customer identity name right there. Save that. And at that point, you're ready to start integrating with Atrix. So at this point, I think we've done all the setup. We're ready to go and start using Atrix and getting our W-2s created or any other tax reporting that we need to do for year end, for quarter end. So let's go ahead and take you through that, and then you'll be on your way. So I'm going to go back to my payroll screen here, and you're going to see under all, under reporting, you're going to have an option right here for Atrix. So you can go ahead and click that button. And if you are familiar with using Atrix from other systems like the Sage 300 CRE product, it's going to be a little bit different, but it's going to look the same. I believe in Intacct, it's going to ask you for the report, the form you want to use before you go into Atrix. Whereas I believe in some of the other legacy systems, it will let you sign into Atrix and then you pick the form. So basically you come into here and you come into what's called compliance reporting. And it's going to ask you to pick your entity. So if you have multiple companies, if you need to do this for multiple companies, you can go ahead and select which company you're doing this for. And for today, we're going to do GC. And then you could pick the federal form or the state form. So, you can do the quarterly reporting here as well. And you can also do your W-2s. Now, we're in October. My 2023 W-2 form option isn't on my menu yet. So I'm just going to go ahead and for demo purposes, we're going to use 2022 for today. But basically, once you get near year end, you're going to see the 2023 version up here as well. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. And it'll give you a description of what the form does. And, in the same token, if you're going to do state, you could pick your state. So I think Oregon was one of them. And then it'll give you the options for that state, all the different forms that you can do. So in this scenario, let's just go ahead and do W-2s. Okay. And now the reporting year, normally if it was 2023, we're going to pick the 2023 reporting year. It will yell at us if we do that because this form isn't for 2023, it's for 2022. So we're going to go ahead and just pretend here and we'll select 2022. The system's going to automatically fill in the start and end date for you. And you don't have to fill out anything else because W-2s is annual. If the form was quarterly based, it's going to ask you to pick the quarter. Once you select that, you go ahead and click Initiate over in the top right here. When you click Initiate is when you're going to get your login information for Atrix. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. And it's going to go ahead and connect with my data. So now it's finding that EIN number and that company name, and it's going to go ahead and validate that payroll data for me. So that'll take a minute or so to connect through all this. So it's asking me here, do you want to use your work in progress? So I had previously started a W-2 run. So this is nice if you are in the middle of it and you have to exit out for some reason. It will track where you left off, and you can say yes to go right back in and start where you left off. In this case, I'm going to say no and start fresh for us. And saying, hey, you sure? Yep, we're sure. This is also nice because halfway through the process, if you do find some things that you forgot to set up, aren't showing up, you could exit out and go fix them in Intacct and then come back into here and just start over. So it's going to go ahead and prepare based on the form we selected, prepare all the data it needs. Now, if you remember in the entity setup, it asked us for certain states. You can see here that when we went into our prior sessions, we set up the 401k fields. So now it's saying, hey, before 401k wasn't active, well, you just activated it. So is that correct? So if we had activated our HSA here or anything else that we needed to report in the W-2, it's going to show you here and give you a chance to say yes or no, it's correct. And same thing for your states. If you've added tax ID numbers, if you've added more states in that entity setup, it's going to say, hey, here's the new values. Is that correct? And we're going to go ahead and say save. They'll always come in and ask you your company and trade name. And it's always going to ask you to verify the addresses. So stuff we did in that enrollment phase, we can always come into here and modify it on the screen and then go ahead and save it for later. And your contact information. So I had already filled all that out. I would normally have an email address. Basically, it's going to ask you now if you're used to Atrix. This is typical. You're going to get this question when you're in the system, regardless of what product you're using. I'm filing for my company. Just say next. And now it's going to go and say, all right, well, here's all the states that we have data for based on the year. So I want you to verify all of the W-2 information, all of the count numbers, the state tax IDs. Just go ahead and look at those and verify them, make sure they're exactly what you need. So for example, it looks like we just have Oregon data for 2022. So it's saying here's our state unemployment, here's our state withholding, and then there are some local taxes for Oregon. So here's the W-2 name for that, the tax type, and the account. And you can add some more on the fly if you need to, but we're going to go ahead and hit validate. And then once we validated, we're going to hit next. And now we're getting into the W-2 questions. So basically, again, if you're familiar with Atrix and from other products, these are the same type of questions that are asked throughout, so you should be familiar with them. Do you have any employees who are exempt from any part of Medicare, Social Security? Do you have any employees who are members of the clergy? And do you want to use control numbers on your W-2? So I usually use control numbers by default. So I usually say yes here. Okay. Then it's going to go ahead and fill out information based on what we set up in our entity setup. And you can kind of see here that I don't think I'm a Medicare government employee. I might have some stuff set up incorrect here. So kind of payer is going to be 941. And kind of employer. This is all based on that entity setup. And then you can also track, for example, if there's third-party sick pay. And all this stuff's pretty typical within the W-2 program. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit next here. And then it's just going to give you some options like for Social Security numbers. Do you want to show the whole Social Security number? Do you want to truncate it with asterisks, truncate it with X's? Let's go ahead and do it with X's. And now it's going to go and read all that data and transfer it up into Atrix. So, and what's really nice is it comes into here and gives you a chance to view the information and fix things that came over incorrectly or that are missing. So this goes back to our first steps in this process is the more you do ahead of time and cleanup, the less you're going to have to do here. So you can see here, it's going to go through 5 steps. And the first step is verifying employee information. And it's going to always have the error messages in red. So it's basically saying, hey, there's 7 Social Security numbers that are incorrect. And it shows you right here, which is really nice. So if you have a lot of employees, you can click on it and it'll take you right to it. And then you can close that back up and there's an address missing for an employee. There's a city missing, a state, and a zip code. So you can see here, it looks like it probably brought in a 0 incorrectly, or maybe I didn't check these employees. I bet you there was this was not entered correctly. So what is nice, you can also set up reports in Intact to verify your Social Security numbers, things like that. So you can check those ahead of time. I'm just going to put a 0 on the end of them for now. Actually, I'm going to put 2 zeros on the end of them. Okay, and you see how the field changes. Now it's not an error anymore. So the only error we have is 1 employee, and that employee doesn't have an address. So we're going to go very simple. Now you can also just tab through here. And let's go Portland, Oregon. Grab the state here, Portland, Oregon. And then we'll just put in 97201. All right, so now you see the errors are gone. We can hit next here. And now it's going to go through and see if there's any additional information that we need to fill out, like, you know, who gets checked off for retirement plan. And what's really nice is if you click on the employee, you'll notice down here, it's going to show the box 10 through 14 information. So you get a good look of, does somebody have, for example, 401k on here? So you can see here that that employee has 401k, which is the D, and I need to check off the retirement plan. And you can do that in the detail as well here. So once you go through and check these off, you're just going to keep hitting next in the system. And it's going to go through and verify information, make sure the data lines up, Social Security, that type of items in the system. So this step 3 is all about federal, making sure the federal information is correct. I'm going to go ahead and hit next, and now it'll verify the state information. So if you have multiple states, you'll see all your different states here as a separate column. You just hit next. And now it's going to verify all other information like local taxes, things like that in the system here. So we're through step 5. We're 80% done. You can save it at any time, like I said, and come back later if you need to. I'm just going to keep hitting next here. Now it's going to do one final check for errors, and it's going to transfer the data into the e-filing center. So we're going to let that load up. And it's going to go ahead and generate some pricing for us for the e-filing options. So we'll go ahead and let that finish. And we'll take you all the way through near the end, and then basically you'll be on your way. So what it's saying here is, hey, you only have 10 employees. There's a minimum charge, $24. And then there's some different options you can check off, like if you want to e-file W-2s. You could check all that information off, e-file your state W-2s and reconciliation forms, so you can check all that as well. So we're just going to do the complete e-file service, which is the typical one. But you can do multiple options, and there's more information on here. So if you hit next, and you could elect to buy a PDF archive of your W-2s, that's up to you guys and what you want to do. You can also print out copies as well during this process. And now basically it's going to show you all the states that you've elected to e-file for. And you could check all the states, and it all comes checked off by default, but you can uncheck if there's one state that you file manually. You can uncheck that here as well. And you can have control numbers, maybe just do a 001, something like that in your control numbers. Or you could say do not include W-2 control numbers. And what it's going to basically do is generate all this information. At each step of the way here, it's going to show you the W-2s and what they look like. So it's basically saying, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do W-2s, we're going to do W-3, we're going to do Oregon W-2, employee copy, employer copy. And we'll click next here. And it's going to go ahead and start building the forms for us. So it's a very wizard-like process once you get into here. And this is the screen I wanted to get you to. And now basically you have your different copies of your W-2. So you have your federal W-2. Okay, you can click a copy here when you're ready for the next one. So if I hit record copies, it'll generate a PDF file, and you can just do that as well. So that's usually what I do. And then when that looks good, I'm going to go next. And now it'll go to your W-3. This one typically want to print out, so I would do a records copy of that as well. And you'll notice here if there's anything missing, it will be a red field. It'll make you fill out. So if there's something that didn't get generated correctly in our first steps, it'll tell you here on the form. Now this is basically the Oregon W-2, so it's really just showing you a copy. The old way you'd have all these different copies that you'd print out, but really they're just the same forms. You could download a copy if you want. I'm just going to skip it. And now it looks like Oregon has a special form that you could generate off of this, and you can see here these fields are required first quarter, third quarter. I don't think I had any in here in my demo data, so that's why I'm just going to put in zeros here. I have no idea, so I'm just going to fill something in, but okay. Okay, so if there's red fields, you go ahead and fill that out, and then next. Then you have an employer copy. So this is the one I might want to get a copy of. It's a nice to have, that employer copy showing you each employee, and 4 on a page, less paper to print out if you want to print a copy of it. And at that point, it's going to pop you into the e-file, and it's going to take you into going ahead and submitting it electronically. And this is kind of where we'll end, but let's go ahead and get it through here. And you're going to have all kinds of sales pitches here. So just make sure you read through these and only say yes when you really want to. I'm going to say no to decline that. And basically it's going to give you a place to say, okay, here's what your total charge is going to be. And at that point, basically it's going to e-file as soon as possible is what it's saying here. And then when I next through it, and now it's going to ask you for payment information for that $24. So this is where we'll stop because I don't have a credit card to put in. But basically, you're just going to keep going, nexting through here, and then you'll submit at the end, and your W-2s will now be e-filed. You'll get a email notification that they went through from that point, and that's it. It's as simple as just making sure you're prepared, getting that data filled out, completed ahead of time. The more you can do there, the better. And at that point, once you get to this section in the process, you're just going to hit next a bunch of times in reality. So go ahead and review this video and use it as much as you need. Feel free to comment. Any questions, please put them in the comments below. You can email us directly at help@bangerdinc.com. And please like and subscribe. And look forward to talking with you again in another topic. And have a great day. Thank you.